Hey you guys, so today I want to talk to you about this second type of interest calculation that we can do, which is when interest is compounded, we call it in times per year. So this is when there's a set number of times that the interest is compounded. So the other type of interest we looked at was continuous, which means that it was constantly being applied. When it's compounded in times per year, it means it's not constant. There's a very specific number of times that it's going to be applied. So we have a formula that we use for this, and that formula is A equals P times 1 plus r over n to the power of n times t. And a lot of these variables are the same as what we had from the other formula. So starting with A is still the final amount of money. So it's going to be that final amount, that final total that we're looking for. P is still the principal or the starting amount of money. So whether you're investing or borrowing money, that's that very first amount of money that you have. So that's P. And then R is the interest rate. And we're still going to have to convert that interest rate from a percentage to a decimal. So we're going to have to make it a decimal to use it in this formula. And then n is the number of times compounded each year. And this is the only variable in this formula that's new. All the other variables we saw in the other formula, but now we have this n, which stands for the number of times compounded each year. And when you're looking at problems, it will actually say something like compounded monthly or compounded daily. So for example, if it was compounded monthly, if you had a problem that said the interest was compounded monthly, we have to figure out how many times does that happen in 1 year. So there's 12 months in a year. So if it's compounded monthly, n would be equal to 12. If it was compounded daily, there are 365 days in a year. So n would equal 365. And those are the ones you'll see most often, monthly and daily. And then finally, just like with our last formula, T stands for the number of years. So now that we know all those variables, we can look at an example. So we've got this problem that says Gina takes out a loan for $4,000 her first year of college. If the interest rate is 8.5% compounded daily, how much will Gina owe after 4 years? So we want to go through and figure out what these values in the problem are and how to plug them in to our formula. So to start off with, we need to make sure we're using the correct formula, that we can use this formula. So reading our problem, and I'm going to try and make it a little more easy for you to see. There it goes. All right. So it says, she takes out a loan for $4,000. We have our interest rate, and it says right here, this is the important part, compounded daily. So compounded daily. So because it's compounded daily, that's a specific number of times per year. If it does not say the word continuously right here after the word compounded, then we always use this formula. The only time we use the other formula from the other video is if it says the word continuously. Since it doesn't, we know we need to use this formula. So when we show our work, we're going to be using the formula A equals P times 1 plus r over n to the power of n times t. So that's the formula we're going to be using. Sorry, I know it's kind of hard to see it on there. All right, next, we need to figure out what values we can plug into this formula. So A is what we're looking for because A is that final amount. So we don't know what A is. We're going to try and figure out what A equals. Next, we get to P, which is our principal or starting amount. So we need to look in our problem for something that could be our starting amount of money. So reading the problem, it says Gina takes out a loan for $4,000 her first year of college. So we've got this $4,000 right here that's been borrowed. That's that principal amount that's been borrowed at the very beginning. So where we have P in our formula, we're going to plug in that number 4,000. And then next we have 1 plus R over N. So we can't do anything with the number 1. It's just a number in the formula. When we get to R, though, we need to figure out what R is equal to. So R, if we look at our little cheat sheet up here, R is the interest rate as a decimal. So we need to find our interest rate in this example problem. So looking at the problem, she takes out a loan for $4,000. It says if the interest rate is 8.5%. So we've got this number here, 8.5%. That's going to be our interest rate. But notice it says interest rate as a decimal. So before we plug this number into the formula, we have to change it to a decimal. So we take our 8.5%, and to convert a percent into a decimal, we take the decimal place and we move it 2 places to the left. And then if there's a gap like you have right here, we plug in a placeholder 0. Once you've moved the decimal 2 places to the left, you can erase the percentage sign, and that gives you the decimal. So 0.085 is what we're going to plug in for R in our formula, 0.085. So that's R. Next is R over N, so we need to figure out what N is. And N, according to our cheat sheet right here, is the number of times compounded each year. So we need to read this problem and figure out how many times it's compounded each year. So as we read, the interest rate is 8.5%, compounded daily. So that's the important word right here for N. It's compounded daily. And we need to figure out how many times that is per year. So there's 365 days in a year. So if it's compounded daily, it's compounded 365 times. So N is going to equal 365. And that was one of the examples I gave you up here. So when we plug this in for N in our formula, we're going to plug in 365. Then to the power of N times T. So we use the same number for N, 365, times, now the last thing we have to find is T, which is the number of years. So coming down and finding our last value we need from our problem, it says how much will Gina owe after 4 years? So that's the last number that we need right here. She's going to have that loan out for 4 years, so that's how long that interest is going to be applied. So 4 is what we're going to plug in to our problem for T. So we're going to plug in a 4 right here. And now we want to figure out what all of this equals. So rather than trying to do that by hand, because that would be really challenging, we're going to go over and use our calculator. So I'm going to use Symbolab again for this one. And I'm just going to type in exactly what I have over here. So I've got 4,000 times 1 plus, and then to get this fraction, there's a button up here at the top that looks like a box, a line, and then a box underneath. That will give me a fraction. On top of my fraction, I have 0.085, and then on the bottom, we're dividing by 365. Then I'm going to arrow outside of the parentheses, and then to get my exponent of 365 times 4, I'm going to click this button right here where there's X with a box. That's going to allow me to type in a power, and in that power, I'm going to type in 365 times 4, and I just used the times button on my keyboard to get times 4. Now that I've typed it all in and it matches what I have written out, I can click go. All right, and then once that loads, it'll give me my final answer right here. So I'm going to go over and write this to the side, but remember we're talking about money since we're talking about interest. So I'm going to need a dollar sign for my amount. Then I write the number in front of the decimal, 5619 point, and then I'm going to round to 2 decimal places. So I had 567. So looking at the third decimal, since that's a 7, that tells me my 6 needs to round up. So instead of 0.56, we're going to round up to 0.57. So this would be the final answer. All right, so now that we've talked about the two types of interest, the N times per year formula and the continuous formula, now that you have these two formulas, I want you to head on over to Edulastic and finish the assignment that's on there. It's all about plugging the numbers into these formulas and figuring out which formula you need to use to find the interest. All right, you guys, let me know if you've got any questions, and then make it a great day or not. The choice is yours.